All right, everyone. Welcome once again to the Faces of Business. I am your host, Damon Pistolka, and I am excited for our guest today because we have Kyle Smith from Strata Cloud Accountants in the house, and we're going to be talking about aligning personal goals with your business vision. Kyle, thanks for being here today, man.
Super excited, Damon. Glad to be
Oh,
here.
it's going to be fun. So we don't we don't really get to talk about this much, and I think it's going to be really fun and interesting because most people don't think about their personal goals with their business vision and how that kind of works together. So we'll get into that in a moment here, but we always like to start off by understanding a bit about your background and how you got into doing what you're doing today.
Yeah. Maybe you can tell by the Longhorn clock in the background. I'm a UT University of Texas grad. Um, and coming out of school, my dad had been in the restaurant industry for his whole career. So I kind of grew up around that, and he decided he was going to start a restaurant chain here, or franchise a restaurant chain here in Austin and San Antonio. So I thought that could be a perfect opportunity for me. One, because I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do. I have a finance degree and came from that space, but I secretly wanted to be a professional poker player. So, so I was thinking I could work for my dad's company and kind of learn the finance side, and then also secretly moonlight as a poker player. So that's how I started. That's how my finance journey started. And while I was playing poker, I realized this is a game. Well, one, I wasn't the best player in the world, so that kind of forced my hand on the poker front. But two,
Yeah,
poker a lot. I realized if I win, somebody has to lose, and vice versa. And I thought I want to do something where if I win, the people I'm working with can win as well. The people I'm sitting down next to can also win. So that's what kind of started the entrepreneurial bug in me, thinking I could, start what became Strata Cloud down the line. That started the journey. So
yeah,
worked with my dad for 4 or 5 years. I learned a ton what not to do, but also learned what works, and then
yeah,
started a career as a fractional controller and CFO for bars and restaurants here in Austin, um, and also worked as a director of finance for a brewery, which was really awesome because I got to cut my teeth on cost accounting and learn how to make money in that industry. And it's a tough industry, make money,
yeah,
very margin. So there's a lot for a director of finance to do on the cost side and making sure that everything is efficient, working as it should. So
yeah,
that was about a 2 year crash course. Uh, and then at that point, I realized I'd want some exposure to other industries. So I went to work for a company called Scale Factor here in Austin, and they are industry agnostic, meaning I got another 2 year crash course in all the industries that I didn't have familiarity with previously.
mm-hmm.
And I was an implementation person at that company, or led the implementation team, which meant I got to see a ton of different companies, and we had to get their accounting fixed and their finance department fixed very quickly a lot of times because more often than not, people coming to Scale Factor or to me at Strata Cloud and saying our books are perfect, our finance department is perfect. Can you help us? It's usually usually the other way around. So learned a lot of good techniques there, and a lot of industries, like I said. Um, Scale Factor was trying to build software, and me and my two partners, my two amazing partners at Strata Cloud, were all working at Scale Factor at the time, and we thought we could split off and focus on service and really working with clients using Scale Factor's technology and whatever else was the best technology at the time. And that's why we started Strata Cloud. So
Cool.
Scale Factor didn't work out, or the software they were trying to build definitely, wasn't didn't hit their goal. But we were able to, take our relationships and start Strata Cloud with the idea of, like you said at the beginning, making sure that people's goals and business owners and executive teams, their goals are aligned with the business, and then the business has an efficient back office finance department to make sure that cash coming in the door is used most efficiently, and we're not leaving the money on the table. Because, like I always say to clients, if something happens that you don't see and not measuring on the financial side, a small mistake can become a very large mistake over time, over periods, because month over month over month over month over some is something that you don't address. That starts adding up and can become a large chunk, a large sum of money that affects a lot of things. It can affect the well-being of the owner. It can affect valuation of the business. Um,
Hmm.
that's our strategy, is that we make sure that those things are addressed.
Yeah, that's a huge thing. So let's go back a little bit because I tell you your experience at the brewery is very interesting because I do a lot of work with people that are in manufacturing and people look at all these breweries and I look at them as it's a manufacturing company, right? It's a different
Absolutely.
process, it's a different thing, but there's like you said, the cost of goods, the labor and everything else. And then when you look at the end, those are challenging businesses for people to run.
Absolutely. And there's
Yeah.
a lot of there's a lot of things that people don't think about, like depreciation.
Yeah.
So we could be you could be working in a brewery and think you're doing well in terms of you're flowing cash, but you might have spent 3 times as much as you thought you were going to start it up. And the investors who invested in that brewery in that type of scenario, their runway just got a lot longer in a very low
Mhm.
margin business, like you talked about. So there's a lot of things to consider, um, and there's a lot of complication when you're working with breweries, which is fun for me if I'm trying to learn, how cost accounting works and making sure that we're making money. But there's a lot of things that people don't think about, like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I you just see so many that start and so many that go down, but the ones that stay there for years and years, I mean, they do have to have their costs in order and they run a tight ship because it's an easy business to get out over the skis too far and pretty soon you're just not making it.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
think it's really a timing game, because I think you're on the money. If a lot of times people are going to say, like, here's the demand, here's the market, so I'm going to build for it, and that way we're not missing out on the demand side. What I kind of think is the opposite. It's really it comes down to costs are critical to surviving, but sales are critical to surviving. So you got to work backwards. You build the sales and then you build capacity behind it. And that way you make sure that you're running lean and mean, and you're not wasting capacity, because that's the whole key, is you want to be running as close as you can to max of what your brewery can do at any given time, and you kind of build into the demand. And then that way, if the demand isn't where you think it's going to be, because it moves very quickly, you can
Yeah.
scale up and back. And if you have I'm kind of getting into the weeds a little bit, but if you have the ability to pivot on what you're making, that's critical too. So if you can pivot into making like water or seltzer, white claw type things very
Yeah.
quickly as the market changes, you're going to be in better shape that way too. So to me, it's start small, see where your market is, and adjust.
That is so huge. I mean, if people didn't really grapple what you said, just grasp what you just said, is you want to build your sales, then put the capacity in behind it. Because what you'll see, and this happens in a lot of businesses, I don't care what business it is they have all this capacity, they can start up with all this capacity. Whereas I think is a real smart and a real cash savvy way is get the sales going, start, maybe you're brewing beer in a bucket almost until you start some sales going and get everything rolling and build them in little and build that capacity over time. Because I can go out and you see it all over in Austin and here where I'm at in north of Seattle is people will come in and spend a tremendous amount of money on a brewery. They will spend because the tankage and I mean it's just a lot. It's a lot, and especially when you get into a larger size. But if the demand's not there, like you said, the margin's not. It's not a fat margin, so you can't cover the costs. It's just
Yeah.
not a profitable business. So
Yep. And you can
yeah,
project anything you want. You know what I
yeah,
mean? You can say, here's the market, and you can make it look great.
yeah, yeah.
But
We sell $1 billion worth of beer in this market, and we're gonna get whatever percentage of it. But getting that percentage is a lot tougher than people realize.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, good stuff. Well, I just want to say real quick, we had Inger stopping by today. Happy Tuesday to you, Inger. And so we're going to come on down the road here a little bit. So you were out there and working with Scale Factor, doing their with their technology and helping accounting departments get up to speed. What were some of the most interesting businesses you got to help?
Oh man. Well, interesting for me is profitable. I like seeing
Yeah.
how businesses work at the time, and this could be. I'm sure it is different now because I just talked with a company that was an SEM SEO company that was
Mm-hmm.
selling a flat subscription with 100%, according to them. I haven't looked into it, but it's 100% AI. So
Mm-hmm.
basically, they're saying we don't need people anymore. We can do SEO, SEM using AI for a certain monthly fee, which I thought was
Mm-hmm.
pretty amazing. And I was looking to see if it was legitimate because we could have clients that would be interested in that.
Yeah.
That said, this was 4 or 5 years ago. There was a marketing company, SEO, SEM, and they had their business set up. They used a set number of people and they made 60% bottom line on
Ooh.
every deal that they did. And not to not that numbers are everything, but that type of a business, and they were able to scale it very quickly too.
Yeah.
So when I see that and I see how clean and streamlined it is, that was one of the rare ones where I was wondering why why are you coming to us? You know your business very well, and it's very clean and it's very profitable. And
Yeah.
I didn't know, I'd never seen kind of behind the scenes how SEO SEM worked, but they'd focused on very specific a very specific industry and just built their business up that way, kind of like you said, from the ground up. They start with the sales and kind of expanded the team behind it. But it was a business that required very little, um, very little labor for amount of revenue that they were doing. Uh,
Yeah.
so that was a kind of cool one that I saw. They got to work with them.
Ah, real cool. Real cool. Yeah, we've got a long-term client that has been in the e-commerce business as a reseller and in eight-figure business, runs it with three or four people. And when you get these things going like that, it's really interesting to see how something like that you're talking about the electronics behind it and what's happening with no people. It's scary almost. It's scary, but it's interesting. So,
Yeah,
good
no, it's
stuff.
pretty crazy.
Yeah, yeah. So, as you've come along through this journey, you start talking about personal goals and business vision. What really kicked off this idea with you about the importance of aligning your personal goals with your business vision as you're working with people?
Yeah, so we were when we were at the height at Scale Factor, we were onboarding 20. Our department is onboarding 20 to 30 businesses a week
Ooh.
uh, for a while, and so I would see it again and again. That's probably why I was trying to think back of cool businesses that we saw. I was so um, focused on making sure that we were flowing through all the businesses that we need to at the time. I was
Mm-hmm.
having trouble thinking back of actual businesses and cool business models that we worked with, but I would have to I'd have to go back and think more on that one. But that said, working with 20 to 30 businesses a week, I saw it again and again where a business would say, we talk in onboarding and we'd say, what's your goals for the year? And they would just pick a number. Not always. A lot of time they'd say, I want to grow by 50%. Okay, what does that mean? Is that possible? What's that going to look like for your personal hours that you're spending in the business? Because right now you're spending 50 hours a week, and you don't a team that's behind you that can scale. So how are you going to grow 50% in a year with no backup and no pathway to move yourself out of the weeds and into more strategic level? um, Not expect to work 70, 80 hours a week and burn yourself out. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that's a broad example, but I saw that type of scenario again and again. So that, um, and we would talk all the time. My partner and I trained for a marathon together when we were kind of thinking about what Strata was, and that's what we chat about during runs. Is there's so many people that executive teams, business, they don't think about what their goal is and how it's going to affect their life, and what's their plan to get there. And so that's why it was such a passion and priority for us, because it happens all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's for sure. So give me some examples that you've seen before where people don't do this and then they go down the road anyway and have some real negative consequences for it.
Yeah. I mean, we were chatting with somebody that just signed up with us today, and I was chatting with her yesterday, and their business was growing like crazy, and the revenue was, going probably 1-2x of what they the prior year. Um, and but they had a massive cash flow problem, and it kind of, to her, came out of nowhere. Very, you know, rightfully so, because she's not focused on the finances; she's focused on growing the business. And so
Mhm.
she had to react to that by getting some loans that I would call predatory. They were certainly not ideal and can really put a strain on the business. And I've seen that more than one time, where a business might be profitable, but the debt service is sucking up the entire profit. So if you look at like
Mhm.
their EBITDA, they're doing pretty well, but if you add in the debt service because of those type of loans, all of a sudden they're not making money, and that
Yeah.
is the worst shame in the world. If you've got a profitable business that's growing, that you've spent a ton of time on, but now you can't survive as a business because you don't have the cash flow to do it, because of those loans that are sucking you dry. Uh, that's the one thing that I would like to avoid, or love to impart to everybody, that you need to measure your financials, because that person, if they were able to see it, they could probably get better financing, at a much lower rate, take the burden off of the business, and then the business can grow. And if you've got a profitable business, that's something that you can work with. That's a rarity in itself. So don't let cash flow be the thing that destroys the business, is basically what I would say. And like you said in the question, the key is you've got to be able to get ahead of it, and you've got to be able to measure it. And she wasn't. They were able to overcome it and get through it, and now they're on the up and up, and we're really excited to work with them. But that could be an existential threat to the business if you don't address it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's for sure. Well, and growth too. I mean, everybody thinks growth is good until you grow. And I mean, I say that from a lot of different directions because um, you look at the profitability, and if you're a business that carries receivables, that can be a huge thing.
Yeah.
We've had clients before that grew so fast that they literally can't keep up with the cash that you need to just fund the purchases of the materials they need to keep growing. And it's a huge thing when you get into that situation, because you're looking as like the business owner is looking at it and going, well, I'm making more and more money every year, but I've got less and less money, it seems like, in the bank account.
Hmm.
And like you said, the EBITDA is great, but the cash in the business is very low.
Yeah, and our goal is the cash that's coming into the business. We want to make sure it's used most efficiently. That said, we get questions all the time. That's a great example. Another super passionate about that. I got asked recently, do you want we want to hire a billing person, I think, because we're growing like crazy, and our same exact problem, like you said, our receivables are going up. Shoot, is it worth hiring a billing person? And I said, hire 2 billing people. Hire as many people as it takes. That is the best investment that you
Yeah.
can make for the business, is to make sure that cash is coming into the business, because without it, you don't have a business. I think people
Yes.
underestimate that. So anything that if you had a position open, and that position is to make sure that cash that you are owed is coming into the business, fill that position, make sure that person's doing their job, because that is critical. And that's life or death for the business. And it maybe hinders your ability to expand if you don't have it. I mean, everything opens up to you if you're making sure that you're maximizing the cash that's coming in. So I
Yeah.
hopefully they take our advice, because it's so critical.
Yeah. Yep. And that is true. It's billing and the collections are something that is key to, especially a growing business, like you said, because if you're running a growing business, reducing 2, 3, 5 days off your collection cycle could be a huge amount of cash that comes into your business. And um, that's where Yeah, I agree 100%. Those billing people can make a huge difference. That's for sure. So as you're doing this and you're helping people come to terms with this, I want to be a $10 million business, but I'm a $5 million business now. What are some of the things you help them walk through as they're setting, they're saying what their goals are, and you're thinking that's really nice, but you haven't considered how this is going to personally and business wise, cash wise, all haven't considered these things. What are some of the things that you begin talking with them about?
Yeah, the first one, and I've seen good CFOs, me included, and I've learned my lesson. When if you're trying to go from 5 to 10 million, as an example, um, to go back to what we talked about before, when you're projecting out, you've got to project out that your receivables are going to grow at least the same rate that your sales are going to grow. So a lot of times people will make a projection and say, I'm going to go to 5 to 10 million. But when they're actually making the projection, they don't account for the receivable balance going up, which it's going to, unless you have some other way to magically make it stay the same as it is when you're at 5 million. You're going to need to account for that. And that could be a large number. So to go back to what
Hmm.
you said, when you're projecting out, that's the first one, is the cash that you think you're going to need. um, we take it actually and get into the nuts and bolts and make sure on these different items to get a good picture of what it looks like. But on a high level, whatever cash you think you're going to need, double it. Uh,
Yeah.
because growing takes more cash than you think it's going to, for those reasons. A lot of time people will just assume my receivable balance will stay flat. No, it's going to grow along with your sales. So I just wanted to impart that, because that's something that I missed early on in my career, that I would do a projection like that and not project, hey, their receivables are going to go up. Payables might as well, but it might be at a very different rate. You might have to keep paying people. So understanding your cash cycle, I guess, another way to
Yeah.
put it, is super important. Um, but I have an example uh, that I think is relevant. We
Cool.
were just a client. They had a very successful location that they opened up, and the way they funded it was with partial outside investors and partially internal cash. Um, the business was that location was a smashing success, and so those investors now have to get paid for life because they took the risk.
Hmm.
Um, but that cash is now leaving the business. So we're looking to open, or they're looking to open, multiple other locations, and now we're able to kind of use the current environment and their cash flows and what they're expecting to come in, and we're recommending as an option that finance with a line of credit or some sort of mezzanine debt. Um, Instead of outside investors, or if they do outside investors, we've structured it differently to where the investors are kind of out of the deal after a certain percentage, so that they can keep that money into the business.
Yeah.
And we're able to do that now because we have the success of the first location. So we can go back to those investors and say, hey, it's not going to be as good of a deal as location one, but compared to what other opportunities you have, it's still going to be a great location, a great investment potentially, because look at how good we did on the first one. So basically, taking the knowledge of what you have in the current market and options. In this case, we were able to structure it differently to where, if this location is like the location they just opened, it's going to be 6 or 7 figures in the next 2 or 3 years that they're going to keep into the business that they wouldn't have to give to outside investors.
Yeah.
So that's the type of thing that we do with companies that are growing, to where maybe if thinking about it, they just say, hey, let's structure it the exact same way we structured it before, not knowing that, hey, this time around we've got a lot more leverage because of the current environment. Let's see if what can we do to make it so it's helpful to the business, but then also attractive to investors. So that's just one example of something that, if a business is growing, looking at the financing and figuring out ways to keep money in the business over the long term.
Yeah, that's a huge thing, keeping money in the business, like you said, and it comes uh, that funding that you just explained to somebody. I get approached by so many people that I want an investor, I want an investor, I want an investor, I want an investor, and they don't realize the consequences of that, and how just other funding options how that might be a lot better over the long term, like you said, because they're in the situation now with that one location where they are paying their investors for a very long time on that,
Yes.
and beyond what is reasonable. I mean, because everybody should get a reasonable return if there's success, but and investors will take the deal they get,
Oh
and
yeah, they're very
most
happy in that case. That's for sure.
yeah, yeah, and most people don't go, well, am I giving someone too good of a deal? And that could be the case. And you talked about mezzanine debt and other sources of funding. I really like that, because you need to consider all your options every time you're looking at doing some sort of expansion like that, because it may not be the easiest way to get money, but it might be the best way to get money.
Yep.
And yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
And look at the bigger companies. I mean, they explore a lot of alternatives to get funding, and a lot
Yeah.
of different pieces come together in the same deal, even stacking, some of it's equity, some of it's regular bank debt, some of it's mezzanine debt, and the way that they put things together. You really have to understand what's best for the situation, and like you said, how do we keep the most cash in our pocket so we can keep the business going forward?
Absolutely. That's
Yeah,
put better than I could think about it. I'll steal that one.
yeah,
Uh,
it's
but but no, that's it. That's it. And the piece I would add is a lot of people when they decide something, I think in business, especially if it's finance related, because they don't want to focus on finance necessarily. It's okay. We made the decision. Let's keep going, which is important. But at the same time, you also need to think about the current environment today, and then you're going to need to revisit next week. So, what I just
yeah,
said, the thing I just explained about how they're financing, that could change next week.
yes,
We need to keep talking about it and use the time that you have to make the best decision for the business. I think a lot of time consistently measuring is something that's highly underrated because there's things that come up, and the best that you can do is pivot around the things that you don't know about. So if you can learn more about what's coming from week to week, take that knowledge. Don't ignore what's coming down the pike. Take it and you know adapt your plan if you need to. So that's another big thing that we do when we come in is let's keep measuring and make sure that what we're doing makes sense instead of just assuming this is the right answer because we talked about it and then forget about it.
yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. We talked a little bit about this before we got on, but when you come into clients and start working with them, are there certain KPIs, key measures that you like to see them start working with to really understand their business better?
Yes, and this maybe I know there's savvy people listening, so this might seem basic, but we really like to keep to the five basic financial KPIs that are on the profit and loss statement. So it's revenue, gross profit percentage, net income percentage, and I guess I lied. One is not on the income statement, but it's on the cash flow statement. That's net cash flow. So
Yeah.
those high level five KPIs, um, those can kind of go across industry. And
Mhm.
there's a lot of people that aren't measuring those. There's a lot of business owners that aren't looking at those and looking at them consistently. And if you understand those from top to bottom, you can make decisions for the business. Doesn't matter how big or small you are. If you can understand those, especially the difference between cash and net income that we kind of talked about before,
Mhm.
um, if you're measuring that consistently, asking questions on why that is, because you don't need to understand a cash flow statement. I think most non-financial professionals don't look at the cash flow statement and understand how it works necessarily. But you don't need to know that. You just need to know the bottom line of the cash flow statement, the bottom line of net income. If they're different, you have to know why, or you at least have to ask the question and start on the answer. Because if you don't, there's a lot of things that can go wrong. You gave an example earlier, and I had an example that was pretty potent on that exact point as well. Um,
Cool.
that it related. So we had a business that came to us. They had gone to the bank and they thought their cash flow was pretty solid.
Yeah.
Cash in the bank was pretty consistent. So they went to the bank to expand. The bank came back to them and said, "We can't give you money because you're not profitable." and your payables balance is continuing to grow every month. And they were pretty taken aback of, well, why that doesn't make sense. Our cash flow is pretty consistent. And I know but they didn't realize that their cash was consistent because they weren't paying theirs month over month over month, and that accounts payable balance kept growing and growing and growing. So they had
Yeah.
cash in the bank that was not theirs. It was cash that was owed to vendors. So the bank
Yep.
said, we're not going to give you money to expand because you're going to have to take that money and pay vendors off, and also you're not profitable. So if they had been looking at net income, they'd see that their net income was negative, and they'd say their net cash flow was probably break even, maybe positive from month to month, but there would have been a big gap between those two numbers.
Yeah.
And so that's why we say keep it simple. You don't need to understand everything about the financials, but you need to look at those kind of critical numbers like net income and net cash flow, and make sure if they're different that you're looking into understand why, so you can avoid situations like that could set that business back a year or two, maybe less, but they have a lot of work to do then to get ready to actually fund a new location in that case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the five that you mentioned again those are really, really basic, really good. I mean, really fundamental, because if we use similar ones. If at the end of the day, if what your fixed cost is in your business on a given week, month, whatever you're looking at, and how much gross margin you're generating on a weekly basis, I mean, it's pretty simple after that.
Yeah.
And you really got to get it down to that level, because if like you said, if you're generating the right amount of revenue, well, then am I generating enough gross margin that will pay for all my fixed expenses? And if I do that, I've got the first battle won,
Yes.
because I got enough money, if I allocate it right, that I should be making money. But like you said, if your receivables or your payables are not carrying along in the same fashion, you can still run into trouble, and that's where your cash flow statement's pretty solid
Yeah.
too. It Those five things are so easy and so underused. So how many times do you run into businesses that are actually measuring those things before you start working with them?
Like I said before, it's the minority. I'd say it's the vast minority, because I know tons of businesses do, but a lot of businesses that are coming to us are kind of looking for that guidance.
Yeah.
So we don't see it a lot, and a lot of the times, the things you just said, that's a mind blower. When I'm on a call with somebody and I can see their eyes light up when I'm explaining that exact thing of, hey, your margin is 15%, and so to break even, you've got to sell 50% as much on a week to week basis. And they were thinking, wow, I didn't know that. We've got a lot of work to do. So how can we do that? And then we can start talking about that. And then you're moving the business forward instead of going around in a
Yeah.
circle. That's really
Yeah.
what it is. So the way you put it, separating your fixed and variable costs, you have to do that as a prerequisite to make sure what you understand what your gross margin is.
Yes.
And so it's super basic, but it has to be done because otherwise you can't answer questions about the business. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and there's another quick example on fixed costs. There was a company that was getting crushed by occupancy costs, by rent, especially in the seasonal months. So they were super slow during like January, February, December, and so we were able to look at the books, measure like we talked about, and then isolate as a big cost because we like to go big to little. Look
Yep.
at the big costs first. Um, and we then started a landlord negotiation where we set up a percent rent structure. So the landlord in that case, we effectively changed occupancy from a fixed cost to more of a variable cost. So during those slower months, their
Mm-hmm.
rent would get lower, so it'd be easier for them to break even or not lose money. And then during their gangbuster months in the summer, their rent was higher, but they had way more revenue to handle that, and the landlord got to kind of make up what they lost during the slower months. So everybody won in that scenario. And that's a critical case where if you didn't measure it, you'd just be going along and the landlord would be collecting and you'd be hurting every time winter came around.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great point, because it's one of those things that people don't understand, that there are when you understand these things, you can negotiate, you can work with people to find different solutions that will fit your business
Mhm.
and and make the other parties happy as well. That is a big one, especially like if you're in construction or landscaping or something that really goes up and down with the seasonality of the year. That can be huge. Um,
Absolutely.
good stuff there. So now, as you're getting people going, and they're down the road with you a ways, they've got a good handle on their cash flow and things. What are some of the comments you get back from people uh, when they start to see this?
Usually they're like, I wasn't sure the ROI beforehand, but now I can see it. And that's what, me as a finance guy behind the scenes, that's where I have to get better is showing people, hey, like that rent negotiation, that ROI on what we're doing and coming in and doing is, could be 10x, could be 100x a financing scenario. So a lot of times we're like, wow, we we thought you would just come in to fix the books and move things around so we could get some accurate numbers. But now we're seeing direct ROI on the things that you're doing, and that's pretty amazing. So, and it doesn't always happen. You can't always
Hmm.
find something like that, but when we do, that's a really cool moment to see that they're getting huge return on our services because it's not just about the indirect things because it's hard to explain to people value of having accurate books um, in terms of what they're paying out for that. But when you can
Hmm.
show them, hey, we've effectively changed the way that your business operates to make it easier for you to survive and thrive as a business, that's pretty magical when that happens.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and really, there's so much missed opportunity cost by not understanding your books well. I mean, it's like, um, we've helped clients on different situations where it's like, hey, have you looked at this? Paying your suppliers early. This is
Yeah,
one a lot of people don't understand how much money that can really make for them in a year. And now we've got people that are making well over six figures just because they're doing that with certain suppliers. And they're actually using that to categorize if we are in a cash crunch, who do we pay first? Well, you're
yeah,
paying the people you're making money on. And
yep.
it's really interesting how once you understand the finance of a business, how you can use that knowledge to help run a better business and make it more profitable.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we did the same thing with credit card fees with a business that was running huge numbers to where they're saving, 4 or 5 grand per location on
Wow.
their credit card fees, and we lock that in to where if they keep growing, which they will, each new location, that's one of those examples where it compounds if you don't address it. Um,
Yeah.
but to your point, accurate financials, a lot of the times will come in. We had an example. The business had a sales tax that was booked as an expense, which basically meant that they had a vastly overinflated expenses, and they were showing negative net income. And that was just a simple nuts and bolts thing of, hey, that needs to go on your balance sheet and off of your income statement. All of a sudden, their net income went from negative to positive, and that's huge alone. And maybe showing that to a bank to get a loan.
Mhm.
Um, so, like you said, even at a base level, it's really important to understand. You have to have a finance department in the business, is what I say. If that's you as a business owner, if it's us and the things that we can do, obviously that is super powerful. Or if you have an in-house CFO, but either way, you've got to have somebody that's looking at those things to move the business forward because it can be very costly.
Yeah. Yeah. So what's your favorite part about doing what you do?
Well, I'd say when we get to save people, we get to save people money. So
Okay.
for me, when we did that rent negotiation, this was a client last year, and that kind of got signed on the dotted line. That was really cool for me because we spent a lot of hours kind of back and forth um, with the landlord negotiating. So I guess for me, it's seeing kind of the fruits of negotiation labor a lot of the time is what I like best because that's a direct thing that we can effect. So that's what I'm passionate about. But otherwise, to me, it's teaching. So if we see people, a lot of the times people not looking at the books, not understanding. But if we start working together and we measure uh, every month, because there's people, business owners are a lot smarter than I am. They just don't stare. They don't stare at the books every day like I'm doing 8 hours a day. So if they start
Mm-hmm.
learning on that month-to-month cadence and they're getting consistent, and you can see that they're starting to understand and they're starting to point things out on a P&L, that's really cool, because then that's the work that we're doing is now they're able to take that, make decisions about the business, and like I said, they're not going around in a circle anymore. They're moving the business forward.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Kyle, it's been awesome talking with you. I just enjoyed our conversation today because, you brought up a great point about how your personal goals, these business owners and founders' goals really need to align with their business vision because, just going off and saying, hey, I want to do this, you really need to put some thought behind it because it can get you into your personally and professionally into some situations you don't want to. Um, what is the best way if someone wants to get a hold of you to reach out to you?
Yeah. So our website is stratacloudaccountants.com, and we've got a special landing page for the listeners and viewers of Faces of Business. It's stratacloudaccountants.com/faces.
All right.
stratacloudaccountants.com/faces. And we have a downloadable KPI tracker there for
Ooh,
free,
very
and
cool.
more details on those KPIs that we talked about. So I'm all about free resources. Want to people get started on measuring. If anything else, I'd love for every business owner to start measuring those KPIs every month.
Yeah. Yeah. Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, Kyle, thanks for being here today. We really appreciate you taking the time to stop by and talk about aligning your personal goals with business vision and how really thinking about where you want to go with your business is important to make sure that fits with the business, with what you really want to do personally and sharing your experiences and how you see that work well or not work well with people. So thanks for being here today, man.
Yeah, thanks, Damon. It was awesome to talk with you.
Oh, great, great. Well, I want to thank Ingor and Inger, excuse me, and the other LinkedIn user. I can't see who you are that said awesome on there. Thanks so much for being there. All the people that are listening, but you were not able to comment today. Thank you for being here as well. If you did not hear Kyle from the beginning, go back to the beginning. He's dropped a lot of good nuggets in the beginning about really so the 5 KPIs that you want to understand about your business, some of his experience and background. That would be very interesting. Thanks everyone for being here today. We'll be back again later this week. Have an awesome rest of your day, everyone. Hang out for a moment, Kyle, and we'll finish up offline.